Hello, everybody. Sorry about starting a little bit late. Right as I was about to sit down, I remembered a couple other things I might want to have on hand. Excuse me. So I ran to get those. It's been a while because of all the holidays and whatnot. I hope you've been doing well. I kind of want to get back into a regular routine, so I'm hoping that this will be part of that. I guess let me know if you can see me and hear me. Everything seems like it's working fine on my end, but I can't always tell when things mess up. So, excuse me. I'm trying a new cough medicine today, so we'll see how that goes as well. There's a little cat wandering around down there. Do you want to come say hi, little cat? Hello. Want to come say hi? Can I pick you up? No, you're walking away. Okay. She might come back. Who knows? There's Bob and Julie and Quindy. Quindy says everything looks and sounds good. Excellent. So are you in or out, cat? Come here. Come say hi. Yeah, there we go. Say hi. Tell the people they love you. Yes, I want cat hair all over my face right before I start streaming. Thank you. So I don't know what you all did for holidays. Hopefully it was good. Part of the reason I wasn't on for a little while is my in-laws were coming to visit, and we don't really have like a guest room set up or anything, and we have a lot of stuff. And so we spent several weeks kind of trying to tidy up and move things around. My husband had to like undo his whole office so that we could make that into a second bedroom for the time being. My in-laws are both really nice people, and it wasn't one of those like, oh my gosh, I'm panicking from all the judgment and everything's gonna be horrible things. We just wanted them to be comfortable. I mean, they're older, they're in their 80s. Excuse me. So we were just trying to make everything nice for Christmas because it was very important to my mother-in-law to come see us on actual Christmas. I'm like, I'll happily pretend that, January 4th is Christmas or whatever, if you want cheaper flights and don't have to deal with all the madness. And they got super lucky because they were flying Southwest. and then we had snow. Like at first it sounded like all the snow was supposed to be done days before they would leave. And then the snow came and a little later than expected. And while it was very nice to see some snow around Christmas time, which doesn't always happen here, it was kind of like, oh, this is going to mess up the travel, is it? And then you need to look at the people. Look at the people. Show them how pretty you are. Show them how crazy you are. But then all this stuff started with the airlines because of the weather, and then Southwest was like extra borked. And because like the day before they left, Southwest canceled 60% of the flights, but they canceled the flight they were taking the day before that, but not that day. So I was like, okay, because they flew into, we live in Knoxville, they flew into Nashville. That's about 2.5-3 hours away. So it was like, are they going to drive all the way there and then not even be able to take their flight? But it worked out, which is good. Everybody gets lucky sometimes, I guess. I feel bad for all the people it didn't work out for, but as I said, they're in their 80s. They are not the people who need to be sleeping on the airport floors and whatnot. So that, and they were here on, for me, Boxing Day, December 26th is a holiday in Canada and other UK and Commonwealth countries. It's not like there's a particular thing that you do. Maybe there once was. My understanding is that was when Victorian people would box up things for the poor and whatnot. But in recent times, it's more like the way the U.S. has 2 days for Thanksgiving, and like Thursday is Thanksgiving and Friday is whatever. That's what Boxing Day is. So there has, in the past, like when I left Canada, there was like crazy shopping things, but I think Black Friday is so big a presence that it's actually gone over to other countries now. So I don't know if anybody even bothers with Boxing Day sales in Canada anymore. But mostly it's just second Christmas. If you have a larger family, you have like Christmas dinner with some people on Christmas Day, and you have Christmas dinner with other people on Boxing Day, kind of thing. We were supposed to, like, we planned to go out to a restaurant that night, and then that was the snow. So then we cook some more. Anyway, I know this is all very boring stories that I'm telling you, but this is why I missed you for a long time. And then New Year's Day, my husband was off. His work observed New Year's Day Eve, whatever, on Monday after that. So I decided to take the day off from streaming as well. But I feel like my life has been really, it's January. It's the time of resolutions and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's great if that works for you. But I think if you decide to, Bella Grizio sort of does Boxing Day because your birthday is on the 30th. Yeah, that's tough. Having your birthdays in the holiday season, I bet you didn't get a very exciting birthday a lot of years, and that sucks. I had a friend whose birthday was January 2nd, I think, and everybody's just all pooped out by then. or you'd get the combo gift. It's like, it's a combo Christmas birthday gift. It was when I was young, but now I get what I want cheaper. Excellent. So anything you didn't want for Christmas is like, well, now that's my birthday present. That is a good thought. So my personal belief is that New Year's Day is kind of made up. Like, it's not based on a solar thing or a lunar thing. It's just like a calendar day, and we give it all this significance. And that works for some people, but it doesn't work for other people. And I think if like, I just quit smoking on a random day in November. I didn't wait for a Monday. I didn't like it. I just decided. I was sick. I was like, I don't want to go on the porch and smoke. Let's just try to quit. So I think that you can make resolutions and things like that on other days, but I was kind of looking forward to after, like, I got sick after ReaperCon for a long time, and then I got injured, and then we were doing all this stuff for the holidays. I was like, all right, I want to get my life together and have a schedule and get things done, and then I haven't done most of those things. And I don't know why. It's like I have the time now, but for some reason I just can't get my brain to, brain. So if you are not having all the, positive fun time of the new year that everybody else is talking about, don't sweat it. It happens. You can just keep trying. It's not like you failed because you didn't do it on that day. Other days are cool too. So what am I going to do mini-wise today? Because that's what you're really wondering, I'm sure. And when I was trying to, like, I thought I might do the show the day after New Year's Day, before I decided that I wanted to hang out with my husband. So I was trying to think, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I was just really torn by indecision. Well, this guy isn't quite on that list, but we'll leave him here. So I thought about projects I'd like to do, and then I was like, well, I'm going to do a show about prepping, because I think I've talked about it a little once or twice, but I don't think I've really, if I have, it's been a while, so it's the kind of topic that's worth talking about again. So I've got metal minis, I've got, I think these guys are Bones Black. I don't think they're Bones Classic. I think they're Bones Black. I think he's Bones Black as well. And then I've got a few Bones USA as well. I've got these little snowmen because I thought it might be interesting. I don't think I've really painted white much on the show. So I thought it'd be interesting maybe to do the snow, like 2 different color versions of white. Will I actually do that? I don't know, but that seemed like a fun thing we could do on the show. And then we could kind of do the tentacles, color choices based on that. So I know these guys are, okay, they do have Christmas hats on. At first I was thinking, well, they're just wintry because they're snowmen. They do Santa hats on and mistletoe. But we might be painting them in February, January anyway. So we can consider that getting ready way in advance for painting Christmas miniatures next year. Because honestly, if you do want to paint holiday stuff, leaving it until it's actually that holiday is not the recipe for success. I should probably get my Halloween stuff and start working on that now too. So I got those guys. And I haven't decided whether I'm going to paint this guy in the show or not. But I painted this donkey like when he first came out, I think, for Ron. It's on the, if you go look on the Reaper store. The picture of the donkey is the donkey that I painted. He's from the Nativity, but I mean, he's just a donkey, so he can appear in whatever context you wish if you need a donkey in your campaign or game. And I was looking at the pictures for some reason a year or two ago, and I was like, I feel like I would do that differently now. Like I feel like I was a little, there was not much texture. I was a little hesitant with the level of contrast. The other reason it was interesting is when I looked up a donkey picture, I didn't I just think of donkeys as being gray, and there's actually this like black or dark stripe that goes pretty much the whole way from the mane has alternating sections of it, and then it goes down the back, and that is an interesting reason to talk about reference pictures, which if you're interested in how using reference pictures can help your painting, that is the newest post on my blog that I think Wendy just shared. I painted some red panda figures for Darksword, and as much as I love red pandas, I realized that I have not memorized what red pandas look like, so I need to look at pictures. But we're likely to think about that when it's something like an animal that we haven't seen much or whatever, but we don't think about it like leather or metal or skin. It's like, well, we see those things every day. Why would I need to look at a reference picture? And if you want to know why you would need to look at a reference picture, go to my article, because there's a little quick test you can do to demonstrate to yourself why we think we know what things look like more than we do, which is it's just how our brains work. It's not that I'm saying any one of us is dumb, and that we think we remember the visual details of things much more than we do, because what we need to do visually for most of our things that we do in life is look at something and put it in the category. Is that a tiger that's about to eat me, or is that a tabby cat? So you just need to, you're matching something in your memory, whereas taking something from your memory and making it is a completely different skill. And that is not the way we store little bits of information so we can access them quickly to categorize or respond to things, or oh, this is a corner, I shouldn't bump into it, that kind of thing. But we don't memorize as much visual detail about things as we think we do. And some of that is where we get into trouble with, I don't think contrast or lining are very realistic. It's like, well, those actually both relate to real world things that happen. I could have zoomed these out and we could see all these guys. So I'm going to work on prepping some guys. This one I was more just going to, I haven't painted in a while. I was looking for something to warm up on. So, but he's got some features that other of the miniatures don't have. So we'll look at the tools I usually use to prep, and then some other options. So I will start with, and these are many episodes ago, I talked about how I had painted these were the original Learn to Paint kits that Reaper put out. This was in kit 2, which was learning to paint skin and cloth. And that was one of the first figures that I painted. I never did finish the other guy that was in the box. He got half done, but I kept sort of leveling up in between when I was working on him, and then it just I wasn't as drawn to go back and work on it. But anyway, I thought it would be interesting to go back and how would I paint that figure today? And I have two, because I was debating, I'll paint one that follows the original color scheme, and then if I were choosing colors now, maybe still working with those same colors, but how would I work them around the mini? So I may or may not work on two, but I thought it might be interesting to work on one. And this is Lorana the Sorceress. Look at that, Queenie. I remember the name of one. Do I know her number? Absolutely not. And in case anyone missed the donkey, because I did do that one pretty quick, that is the number of the donkey. There's also a... and this one, Queenie, will also have to look up, a pack-laden version if you were looking for a pack animal for an adventuring party or other scenario of that nature. I think it's the same guy, and then Julie can confirm, I guess, that she just loaded him up with satchels and saddle packs and all that kind of stuff that you would be using if you were a pack donkey. All right, so metal minute, and the other reason I thought I'd talk about metal is that it's still, Reaper still sells a ton of metal miniatures, but I know that there are fewer and fewer people out there that get the metal miniatures, And so sometimes if you get one, because it's the, like if you bought some of the Christmas miniatures, I don't think I think all the 12 Days miniatures were Bones USA this year, but if you bought some of the ones that like Christmas Eve, Christmas night, I think they're only available during the holiday season. They were probably in metal, and in case somebody's watching and they're like, what's this metal crap? What am I supposed to do with it? So the first thing I'll say about prep is that it's as much as you want with, there are one or two things that I like strenuously recommend, but if you care about mold lines or not, that is up to you. If you care about putting them on under the base, which I'm not going to do in this episode because we did that like a month and a half ago. I talked about how to, put an integral base like this on something else and expand out the groundwork and things like that. So the two things I recommend, and I'm going to cover at least one of them. I will possibly cover the other one. That was one of the reasons I was late, because I'm like, well, if I want to actually prime, I will need water. And I hadn't gotten water because I figured I wasn't painting. So I don't know if you can see. And this is one of the tricks with mold lines. In fact, I think they show up really well on camera sometimes, more easily than in person. But you can see there's this line around him. It's very faint here. You probably can't see the line on his back or his ears. This stuff here, there's a little bit of extra material. That's called flashing, and it will happen sometimes on plastic, or particularly resin. It happens a ton on resin miniatures. That's just, all of these things are artifacts of the way they're made. There's the big mold line across the bottom, which is kind of like Easter chocolates. So if you picture it, I mean, the plastic, well, I think the plastic's pretty similar too. They just might have more elaborate shapes. But if you think about an Easter bunny, there's like a ridge that goes all the way around. Oops, hold on. I didn't do the very important thing where I help the precise amongst us endure my background. So if you think about an Easter bunny, there's that ridge that goes around because it's the two hollow halves. And that's really the same way they make a miniature. You've got a molded half of this side and a molded half of that side. You put them together. There's little channels. That's where stuff like the flash comes. So there's little channels that shoot the metal or the plastic or the resin into the mold, or allow those things to penetrate the mold. And then it fills up with your miniature shape. But you get that artifact of the mold line. So you get that little ridge around where the mold met. And it's interesting that sometimes it's not, like you can barely see it on the back and you can see it more on the stomach. It's just, I don't know. It's just how it is. I know that if you get something that like only partially fills, or there's little bumps in it, sometimes that's because the temperature of the mold wasn't warm enough or whatever. Let's see. So the Bones USA, I mean, I have seen mold lines on them, but they're a little less. Let's zoom in even more and see if that helps. No, we're at maximum zoom. I'll just hold them up. So I think you can see a little mold line there along his side. And then this is where, there's a number of them in a mold, and they all attach via like a metal, let's call it a sprue, a metal or plastic sprue. So that's where it was cut off. And then these guys are very similar, except I don't know if they attach to a sprue, but there's like stainless steel mold. Like they're super heavy. They're super heavy bricks. And I'm not entirely sure I remember how they make the cavity. I think a machine like cuts out the cavity to make the shapes. And that's how they make, mass-produced plastic. Not just miniatures, just things, just all the things. So if you start, once you become aware of mold lines, you will start seeing them everywhere on plastic things, and sometimes it can drive you crazy. But that's why they're there, and the other little artifacts. It just is what it is. I mean, now people are 3D printing, but then you get all these little areas where the support structure was attached, and there may be little marks. And it can vary from miniature to miniature, because when they make this lady, there's like, I don't know, 8 or 12 of them in a circular mold. for the metal miniatures. And each of the little cavities may not be 100% identical. There's mold making is a craft or an art as much as it is a craft. And then as things wear out, you have to make the molds again because they won't last forever. And depending on the material, like resin molds, I think my understanding is, oh, I'm jumping ahead to the tools. So different people like to use different tools to prep. A hobby knife, you know, a standard 11 blade X-Acto or equivalent, I think you can even see it says X-Acto 11, is a very common tool. I know people who use them on metal. I do not. I don't find them very effective for scraping, and I'm not much for slicing on metal. I will use them on some of these plastics that you'll see. That's when I like them, but I don't know. To me, I prefer the precision and the not having to worry about sharp things of files. So these are like my preferred style of file, and this is what it actually is. And this company is on the web now. It used to be you had to like mail away for their catalog and pay $10 and then you could order things. But I think they're on the web now. I'm not sure they still make you pay money. It's a jewelry supply company. So they make a lot of small things. And I actually bought the Reaper store, like the in-person store, used to get some of this stuff. And I bought one set and I liked it so much that the next year I was visiting for ReaperCon, I bought another one, and that first set like just wore out. So it lasted like 15 years or something. And it's not totally ruined. It just, you know, it takes a lot longer. So I decided I would break out my just in case set. It was time. Finding these online without being able to look at them can be done. But this 2mm is what I find is the important element to look for. So if you search for 2mm diameter diamond files, you will hopefully see something that is about this size. I ordered a bunch of files once just kind of to see what would happen. And this was like early days. There's probably like, I don't think I ordered any of these off Amazon. I don't think Amazon was carrying that wide of a range of items at that time. So I ordered them from like miscellaneous places. And I got, so these ones were actually almost too tiny. I do use these. If you have like a really tight spot, they'll fit in there, but they're very tiny. I think I have an even tinier set. So that's, I mean, I guess maybe this is still 2mm. I don't know, but that would only be because they put this plastic on the shank. But there's a size difference there. And what I guess I should have started with is if you go to just like the hardware store, which is, or even like Hobbytown, you will often just find files like this. So you get a set of these and they'll have like a flat, a half round, and a round and some other things. So if you look closely, these are, they have crosshatches is how they do the filing. This is pretty rough. And this is also pretty, like you see the metal gets stuck in it pretty easily too. It's also pretty large. Like if I go back and put this in context with the figure, I do have this. So all right, this is a flat. I thought it was a half round, but we'll pretend. If you put it in context with a figure, I mean, you know, I can't really get that under her knee to fully deal with all the, and there's absolutely going to be a mold line under her knee. And this is more likely to mar the surface. Certainly, I think it's not going to be a great option for plastics or resins. So the only reason I still have these is I use them to file the bottom of the figures so that they stand nice and flat if I'm not going to. Well, even if I am going to glue this to another base, I want this nice and flat so there's as much glue attachment as possible. And it looks like I actually already did it there. I can't tell. So that's the only reason I keep those. I mean, I guess maybe one day I might. No, because even if I was going to do something bigger, when I did that big order a bunch of files and see what happens thing, I ordered these. I have no idea if this company is even still in business. So the diamond needle files, absolutely, that was what I wanted. And they let me pick just individual shapes too, because the thing about this package is I will never use any of these triangle things. Maybe someone has use for them. I do not. I use like 3 files out of that. But this let you pick just the exact kind that you like. So this is a half round, and I ordered multiple grits. I think is the purple the finer one? Yeah, purple is coarse and red is fine. So I ordered the fine and the coarse. And these are pretty large as well. I mean, they're pretty similar in size to the, I can't remember that company that sells all the stuff at Hobbytown. Like they're the old, like if you go in, they'll have a lot of knives and tweezers and other things, but some of their products are great, but their files are not what works best for us. So it has the problem where it's a little bigger than the figure, but I have ended up using these more than I expected to when I got them, because when I would prep metal miniatures for conventions, I'm prepping like 12, 20 guys, and if it's for blending or something, and you've got, like it was this snowman, which I guess we can try and see what happens. We can try it on the bottom and see what happens. I want you to not have a mold line in the middle of the skirt you're trying to blend so that you don't get frustrated by that. So I would do some basic prep on my miniatures for classes. So I did end up using these, but even though they're like excellent files, I would have loved if these came in the size. Because for the really tough metals and mold lines, they worked better than the other ones. So it's a bit of a crapshoot ordering offline. Micro Mart, is that the place that sells a lot of small tools? I don't think they existed at the time that I made this order, but they are a place to check for that kind of thing. Oh, apparently I had more of these. Oh, because they had the crossing file, which is my favorite, and not every file set has. I think that's why I ended up with extra of those. And I will show you as I go. So this is a crossing file. No, that's a half round. I know I have. There we go. So crossing is what they call that shape. I have no idea what they call all those triangle shapes either. So what it is it's kind of like 2 half rounds stuck together and then smushed a little. But you get an edge. And that edge can work very well for stuff like, why is my camera? I messed with the settings a little. I was trying to get closer, but that edge works really well for hair texture, in between fingers, stuff like that. Not this size so much, although it might work on that under the leg little sharp bit, or, for him, I could get in between the front legs and get some stuff there. But let's go back to the size I find slightly more useful. That's the half round, and that is the crossing file. So you can you get a sharper edge on the crossing file than you get on the half round. Half round is great. I use that for a lot of other things. Billy Grizio saying mostly uses the half round and round. And the flat for the bottom. Yeah, the flat for the bottom of the base is about the only thing I use a flat for as well. It's just too easy to gouge a weird shape in with a half round. I mean with the flat. So let's see if I can find some of these places that I like to use this on her. I think it's actually pretty lucky because the way her hand is, the mold line's not going across the fingers. But I bet we got some in the hair. No, well, this turns out to be a very well cast miniature. Let's see. Let's see if he's got any in his fur. We're just going to pretend that... Oh, well, that's actually partly why I had this guy. Files don't work quite as well on here. I will talk more about that. But if I were trying to file this guy, we'll pretend he's metal for now. And see where the mold line is. So there's like all these ridges. So just filing across the ridge isn't going to solve the whole problem because the mold line is going to be in the dip as well as on the top. So this lets you get down in between the dips. Um, his fingers will be pretty good for showing it too, I think. So you can get in between the fingers. And then hair, it's especially nice because often you will just go across the top and you'll lose some texture. And it doesn't always matter. Like, it doesn't always matter as much as people feel like it matters if you just do this on hair. But you can come back in with these crossing files, especially where there's like, so here she's got little strands, but then there's deeper dips that are kind of like locks of hair. So those are, I would want to make sure those are nice. So I might not worry if I lose a little bit of texture there, but I would want to not have the mold line showing where the locks, the individual sections of hair are. I should have tried to get a bigger selection of miniatures, I guess, if I was going to talk about this in a general way. So what I like about files is you are much less likely to have an accident either on the miniature or on yourself. Now, I have admittedly, have I ever cut myself with an X-Acto? I feel like I did, and fairly recently is probably one of the first times I've cut myself with an X-Acto. But it's probably because I'm so paranoid when I'm using knives. I have punctured myself sometimes with some of these. That's a puncture. It might not be this tool, but I'm more likely to puncture myself than I am to cut myself. But I feel like you're reducing your chance of injury, and you're reducing your chance of slicing something. Like, how easy would it be to slice off her bracelets if I, were scraping with a knife or cutting with a knife? Where I can kind of, here I would get the half round, I think. I can kind of angle it so it's just touching a bit there, and then it's just touching a bit there, and then just a little bit on the top. And then come back with that crossing file. Or you can use an etching tool as well. Really, the file is my preference to the etching tool because it's easy to etch too hard or not hard enough or whatever. But when I was saying, like, it's your preference. If you're painting this lady up real quick for tonight's game and she's just going to be someone that they meet in town and not like a regular recurring character or whatever, do you need to file the mold line off in her armpit? That's a very personal decision. Maybe you don't need to file the mold line off at all. I spend between 8 and 15 hours painting a miniature. To me, spending 15 minutes, half an hour, even an hour doing some prep stuff to make the foundation for that miniature as good as it can possibly be. Like, how can I paint a surface to look smooth convincingly if the surface actually isn't smooth? So for me, it's worth it. I don't expect everyone to do this. Now, if you're trying to enter contests, like you're trying to, why not start on your MSP open entries now? Now would be a great time to start and not stress yourself out. We certainly consider presentation and preparation and stuff like that are factors. There are stronger factors, I think, even in stuff like ordnance and open and whatnot than they are for painting, but there's still a small element of what's considered in painting. So if you're trying to up your game, prep is certainly a thing to look at. Do you need to be as demented as I am? Probably not. And even, honestly, I've chilled out a little over the years. When I'm just, like, doing a quick paint and I just want to relax, I'll get the, like, very prominent ones, the ones on the top, but I won't necessarily worry about the armpits every time and whatnot. Now, the fun thing about prep sometimes is deciding whether a thing is supposed to be there or is an artifact of casting. One of my times doing that, it was a girl that was wearing stockings, and when I was working on the one ankle, I thought that the weird wrinkles and stuff were an artifact of casting, and then when I got to the other one, I realized, oh, he's sculpted it to look as if the stockings are gathering a little bit around the ankles, which is something that totally happens with stockings. And I was a big dummy for filing that off. But then I just painted it on the other. I had the one that was sculpted as a guide, and I wasn't. This is years ago, before I was like, I don't know, a good painter. I don't know how to put that. I mean, I was all right then, and I was always very kind of display oriented in my painting pursuits, not exclusively, but it was a large part of what I was interested in, was, fancier effects. And I don't love that it takes me forever to paint a miniature, but I just kind of accept that that's the way it is. And there are some things I could do to go faster that I just don't like enough to do. Like it takes some of what the fun part is away from me, so I would rather take a little longer and have more fun, I guess that's how I'm saying that. But clearly, if your main reason you're painting is for gaming and that's the fun part, then you would make different decisions. So yeah, it's not too dramatic, but there was a little one there. But I don't even think I'm gonna have to repair much. The trick is trying to figure out where it goes, but knowing that it's like the Easter Bunny, so it has to go in, it has to go in a line around the figure, and very occasionally there will be double mold lines, which I think is, if someone doesn't clean up the masters that are used to make the molds. So the masters are like, there's just one. Like when Julie sculpts a miniature, she just sculpts one, because why would she want to do that more than once? She has other miniatures to sculpt. And then they take that one and they make a small mold of that and cast masters. So you get like 8 or 10 or 12 masters, or however many it takes to fill the pockets to make the production mold. And usually people are very good about cleaning up their masters, but I have purchased miniatures on occasions, not from Reaper, I don't think very often, but from other companies where, and you can tell with the 3D stuff, it's like sometimes people are not cleaning up the 3D prints before they cast, and it's like, why would you not fix these things before you're making miniatures to sell to people? Like, you're gonna make everyone fix all the miniatures you sell, rather than fixing the few miniatures that you need to make the mold. Like, that just doesn't even make sense to me. But there we are. That's probably a little less common now. It may have been more common in the early days, but I've seen production miniatures that are, the cast is so good that you can see those little ridges you get from 3D printers. Because remember, like, how quickly 3D printing technology has come along. So the first miniatures that people were selling commercially from 3D printers were the resolution levels where you saw those little, I'm sure there's a name for that step thing, that the way certain printers do it, but now I think the resin printers do it a different way, and you don't get those annoying marks. We briefly looked at whether 3D printing was like a thing that we wanted to try at home, and based on a number of factors, we decided it was not. So I don't do 3D printing at home. I don't really follow people who make 3D miniatures. It is going to be like, in terms of the prep, when I'm talking about the prep tools, the stuff that you would use on Bones USA or resin are going to be the best tools and methods to use on 3D prints, in my experience. Because I've certainly painted 3D prints. Since Julie and Bob are among the last of the Reaper painters who sculpted old school, if I'm painting something by Bobby Jackson or Jean, often what I have is a 3D print. Not always. Sometimes, now with Bones USA, sometimes what I get is a production miniature. But it depends on how much advanced planning has gone into things. And this miniature, I believe, was sculpted by Dennis Mies. I'm not sure how you say his last name, who sadly is no longer with us. A lot of the Dark Sword miniature catalog, the early days, were sculpted by Dennis Mies as well. So this is a pretty nice cast, and I'm finding that I don't have to do a ton of work. This is one of the few areas where I might use a flat, and you've got, that's the nice thing about the half round, is you got the flat baked in. That's a flat edge. Not sure if it's just having trouble with the metal or what. So if there's a mold line running along that, which there probably is, then that flat gets in. Oh, I can definitely see one there, but I do not know if the camera will be able to see it. So on this side of the scroll, like that interior pocket. So tips for finding mold lines. Metal's kind of hard sometimes because it's reflective, but at the same time you can use that to your advantage, and you do stuff like that. If you see me moving the miniature around like that, and this works actually even on the plastic and resin, it's the different lighting is going to pop that mold line out to your view. I know that there are people in the past who would do things like give the metal itself like a wash with, really thin down black wash, and that'll also help you find the mold lines if you're having trouble with it. But it's definitely one of those things, the more you do it, you're going to get familiar with okay, well, if it's here, then it's got to go here, then it's probably here. And it gets easier to figure out where they go when they're, they get too fine and you couldn't see it, so you're not sure where it went. Following the little trail down the woodland paths. Sometimes if they've got an integral base, that makes it hard to get into the places. But I also like to think that those are times when it's going to be hard for anyone to see that there is a problem. Yeah, so unfortunately, if you get a 3-file set, I was going back to Bella Grizio, said something about the crossing file. The 3-file set is the half round, round, and flat, almost always. And generally we'll just get the crossing file in a larger, like a 9-piece or 12-piece set. And I like it well enough that it's worth it to me. If you do go on Rio Grande and look, you should be able to find a set that's like this, but look carefully because they also have sets like this that, and I think it costs like $12 or $15 last time I looked. But they have some that cost like $100 some that I assume are for really fancy jewelry precision stuff, and maybe they're amazing, but as much as I don't mind spending a little money for good tools, that is an experiment that I am not currently willing to make to find out what would make a $100+ set of files worth $100+ So yeah, that little buckle right here, I don't know if you can see that there's like her top, it's like a bra style top, and it goes to a strap, and there's a little buckle there. That's the kind of thing that it's really easy to think, oh, that's just weird, and file it off, and then realize later, oh no, that was supposed to be there. It can be helpful to look at other people's painted miniatures, but it's not always going to be the right angle to answer your question of, is that supposed to be there or not? And then, but like you can put it back in, or you can paint it as, if it turns out it wasn't supposed to be there, just paint it as a rip or something else. You can do a lot of paint plastic surgery to cover up your mistakes in prep. But I will say, so that I've seen people online sometimes say, oh, I started painting this miniature and I found a mold line, I'm going to have to strip it and start again. I'd never, ever, ever, ever have stripped a miniature and started again because I found a mold line. I'll get the file out and I'll do it, and then I'll put brush on primer on and continue. So it just means I have to try to be really careful not to mess up anything that I did already paint. But I would far rather take a minute and do that than I lost all that painting and having to prime again. I mean, priming is super boring. So. All right, that one looks pretty good in my opinion. let's have a look at, here we can see the flat one work a little better on his base because he's got a big mold line there. I mean, sometimes you can they are definitely sticking up. Although sometimes they kind of almost seem like they're down. Is this, oh, there we go. There's a little piece of flash. Now this little piece of flash is so little that I could very easily rip that off with my fingers. Like very, very easily. I'm not going to, just to show you another tool. Like, I don't think these miniatures need the tool, but it is useful to know about. These are shears. I like these, what do they call them? Well, I like this brand, so Xuron. I actually like this specific brand of shears, Xuron Corp. And I did get these at my local Hobby Town. But these particular ones are close cutting or flat cutting. So the deal is they will cut one side of the object flat. The other side's going to look terrible. But where this joins, it cuts flat. And you can cut, I don't know if I do want to cut his base off, but you can cut even metal bases off with these. And I have very weak, I have like a lot of hand and wrist problems. And I have removed metal bases using, that's the other thing I like about these, is that they don't require a lot of strength to operate. But the other place I use them is if you have stuff like this that's thicker. You go, okay, well, it was so thin that it just popped off. But I would use these with the flat side towards the miniature, and then cut off that flashing and stuff. Which is just from where, you know, if this ridge was bigger, I cut some of it off too. I can probably use it on this guy. It just kind of gives you a head start on, instead of just filing and filing and filing forever. This is why I needed some sacrificial minis. Oh wait, I do have some sacrificial minis. All right, hold on. I ran and got these when I was taking too long to come back. So let's see who we got. His base is pretty thick. Although these are Bones USA, my understanding is that Bones USA is a little more brittle, so that cutting it with shears doesn't always work, but we'll find out. We will find out. Who do I have a lot of? Let's mess with Mengu. I actually don't think they used his last name. Mengu. All right, so this is pretty thick, but I should be able to shear it off. I mean, you'll have to go in like little bites, and so you may have seen that. I don't know if you saw that pop off. Certainly with metal, you want to be a little more careful. What I would do sometimes, and I don't think I have one handy, is get like a plastic bag and do the cutting within a plastic bag, so it's going to catch the things that pop off. Because, I mean, if you're doing it on one of these, I mean, this is metal. It could hurt. I mean, even this could hurt your eye, really. And then it also keeps it from, like, bouncing around your room if you have kids, or, you know, it might mess up your vacuum or something. Now, with metal, what you will find is that pressure can start to deform things. So usually you want to do something like what I'm doing here, where you're kind of getting a little, like making a triangle between the feet. I don't know if you heard the ping on that one, as I don't follow my own advice. But doing this on metal would not be much more difficult than what I'm doing here. And then, so let's get right up to the foot. So I need to orient it so that flat side is next to the foot. And I would probably rather be a little bit off, and then, you know, shave the rest off with a knife or filing or whatever, than to take off some of the sculpted part, which I may have done here. Did I? Nope, I think that is he's got very pointy sculpted toe boots there for extra intimidation factor. Maybe the same thing, I come around here where his surcoat, I have no idea what this piece of clothing would be called. And get next to it. Get next to the side of that foot. The other option for this that I see people use, and it'll probably work pretty well for her, is a jeweler's saw. I find them kind of fiddly and annoying to work with. It is quicker, I think. I mean, if you get it right. The way I've got my setup, I don't think I could get to my jeweler's saw without making a lot of noise and brouhaha. I want to get it down to at least 1 foot. So part of the reason you do this is because that's just how big the clippers are. But part of it is to try to make sure you're not going to make anything. Because you see where when I do that, I'm adding in something that wasn't there before. So the metal or resin or whatever has to have enough give to handle that. And then if it's metal, you're going to have to bend it back a little. So that's kind of the risky part of this. You can, of course, use this to chop off parts for conversions and other things as well. Although, as I say, the other side, let's see if we can find. So this is, the parts I was cutting off. This is not nice and flat. So I might not be able to use both sides of what I converted. Like I chopped the head off a miniature once to put on a different miniature. And I would have had to smooth out the neck area to put another head on there. So then you get down to these little foot stubs. Or, in his case, the cloth would have it too. But I probably won't keep going on that. And you can thin that out. So then you're only having to shave or file a little bit less material. I've even done this on super thick old school dark sword bases, although that was not a fun thing. I'm not going to say that was fun. You can kind of push it together and it shaves some off. But these, I don't use them as much anymore because given the opportunity, I'll just bury this in a base like we did in that other episode. Put stuff around it. But if you want to, if you're making a particular diorama and I need this guy to go on paving stones that I've already made, then that's I'm going to have to take the base off to get that to happen. So that's what I'm doing. And that is how I would do it. And then I would start taking the knives or the files. Let's try those files I said were pretty rough. Because if I mess this part up a little, we're not going to care. So let's see how they do. I don't think they're doing anything. This is like when they first started making Bones USA, so this is the softer material than what they do now, because I do feel like it was working on these guys, and it is. So now that they've switched to the harder resin, plastic, whatever it is, it's resin, I think. Filing is more viable, and scraping is more viable also, which is I will switch to a plastic miniature for a time and talk about scraping. So I'm going to work with the Bones USA's guys first, since a lot of Reaper miniatures that are coming out now are Bones USA. And here is where I will use knives. So if it's resin or something else, hard enough plastic that I can scrape, I would prefer to scrape to other options. I'm going to add a little more light on these guys. On the metal, it was going to glare out. So if I switch back, and so you're using the end or the edge of the blade. I mean, you can come up in the middle too. And you're just scraping. Now, I always like to do this disclaimer that I am not telling you to use knives and sharp objects. If you are a young person, you should certainly consult someone who is not me before you choose to do that. And neither I nor Reaper are responsible for any injury that may result. I am just sharing the way I do it. And this is one of the reasons people love resin miniatures and hard plastic, is because this is actually, you can get a really nice clean finish on this without a lot of effort. I mean, obviously it's not going to 100% work as well in that like snow texture thing there, and on super textured surfaces, but it's really nice for stuff like skin and cloth and those kinds of things to do the scraping. And there's a little bit of, like, I think as I move around, you can kind of see that it's not a super smooth surface. Like if you compare the edge of here to what it looks like there's some snow texture on there. Like it's not meant to look like, super smooth silk cloth or something. It's meant to have a little bit of a texture. And, I'm losing some of that by doing this, but probably not enough to notice. And that's definitely something that, if I use a little bit of those stipple dry brushes that I've shown you on past shows, I could probably duplicate that enough or fake it enough to cover up that little spot is a bit smoother than other spots. So this is bumpier because it's a stick, because that's how you make snowman arms. But you can still get the the little end of the blade in a lot of places. This is a little bump. I don't know if you can see that. It might work better against my finger than the gray. So there's like a little bump. That's the remains of a channel where the plastic shot in. And I would want to remove that if it were me. In this case, you could probably pretend it was part of the gnarled stick. So it depends on the context. A lot of times whether you have to get fussed. I will tell you that more than a few contest miniatures have scars or tattoos or whatever because there was an issue with the surface in that area, and that was an easier way to disguise it than some other method. I find a knife will, like, I don't know that I've kept track of the number of miniatures you can do this with before you need to replace the knife blade, but I don't feel like it burns through knife blades the way the pairing that I would do on softer plastic does. I mean, you can even go this way and make sure that you really got it all once you're pretty sure you did, because sometimes it will kind of look like there's something there even though you actually did get it all. Like it's just a difference in the coloration of the material rather than there's actually still a line or some other issue there. So here on his little hat, is it a pom-pom when it's on the end of Santa's hat? I don't know. The little fur circle thing at the end of the Santa hat. The mold line is actually a little more prominent there for some reason. And that one, I might scrape it, but I might go back to the files just to try to make sure that I'm not shaving anything off that I do want. And I can do that same thing, like get an etcher or even just the end of this, and I can kind of just, push back in a pockmark or whatever here and there where the mold line was so that it's not super obvious that I flattened, because the line goes through. That's the nice thing about 3D printed miniatures, at least, is that the imperfections or the remnants of the casting process are kind of distributed in a less obvious fashion than here's this line that goes in a circle all the way around the thing. Because texture definitely becomes a bit more of an issue with mold lines sometimes than others. Smoother is easier to fix than not smooth. And I'll feel like I can't see it on Santa's hat. This is one of those things where sometimes you're like on the fur band of Santa's hat. And then, so like you'll think it's fine and then you'll paint and you'll be like, oh, it was not fine. But again, so I'll file it down, or and I probably won't do this on any of these. Brush on sealer, and other people's sealer too. It's a little thicker than paint, and you can use it to kind of fill up holes, or even like you can put it up against a mold line you missed, And it takes multiple layers. And then because it's transparent, you will usually have to apply a coat of paint to see if you fixed it or not. Like it'll look like it's wrong still, but you're like, well, I put like 5 layers on there. It's probably fine. So if I've already got paint and primer, like primer, and I've painted some parts, and this seems like a viable solution, I will do this before I will file down to the surface, just because it's far more minimal chance of ruining something. I feel like I've used that on a show, and I have no idea which one to recommend that you go watch. Like what miniature I was painting when I did that. I also could be hallucinating and incorrect about having used that. But if you do want to watch past shows, Quindy will pop in a link to Reaper's YouTube channel. And if you go into the playlist section, each of their different shows has its own playlist. So like if you just want to catch up on an old Reaper Live, or watch Miniatures Den with Luca that shows on Wednesday. And like this goes way back, because like Twitch keeps a couple of weeks, I think. But honestly, the Reaper YouTube channel has stuff from before they were on Twitch even, I think. Like we did a few kind of like sometimes when we would fly into Reaper and they had the studio set up before any of us did any of the streaming or anything, we would sometimes do like either an interview or a paint thing. So I have like a how to paint hair video, I think, that's from like way back, like before we had this style of camera, and the system was way different. But the information on that video is still useful. It is the majority of my secrets for painting hair, which is a thing I very much enjoy. So some of these, I'm like, you know what, we're just going to pretend that's the stick, I think. But it's hard to pretend that a snowman should have a ridge running down the snowballs. So I definitely want to get rid of those. Now, if you get a really raised one, like where one side, it's almost like a fault line in an earthquake, like one side is much taller than the other. They call that mold shift. So it's like the two halves of the mold aren't correctly joined. I think it'll happen either if the person casting the miniatures hasn't assembled the molds correctly, or if the molds are starting to get old. I think it can happen too. And it's pretty bad. I mean, if it was bad enough, now, I mean, I have one miniature, and it's like a big chunky piece of metal I bought years ago. It's super cute. But the mold shift is just so terrible that when I sat down to prep it, I was like, this will take a million years of my life, and I will die inside. So I never painted it. I didn't have those bigger, tougher diamond files back then. Maybe I should see if I can get that miniature out and fix it. But nowadays, if it were really bad, I would probably contact the company and see if I could get a replacement, because I think that's kind of a production issue. But I guess that will, whether a company agrees with you about that will vary from company to company. This is another place that will show mold lines really well, is the edge of the base. And again, whether you care or not, I mean, if you're just going to paint that black, maybe you don't care. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, so. Oh, but I never did file the bottom of that one. Although here, we'll try a little bit of the. So this is the pairing motion. You can see the danger here, because I'm going right towards my tender flesh. This is a bad idea. I'm not recommending that you do this. Whenever possible, one should be cutting away from oneself. But this is the motion that I have found most successful if I want to use a knife on soft plastic miniatures. I think we can probably just file the rest of that down. Because really on a bit, I just want him to not, you see how he's shaking a little when he's going down? I just want to get enough off that he's not going to shake, like he's going to stand flat when he, and that might partly be that this piece of paper is, yeah, my piece of paper is kind of wobbly. But that's all I'm looking to do with the bottoms, is that they're going to stand flat and not look wiggly, because, you know, you plop down your big bad scary guy on the table for the game, and it's harder to take him seriously if he's all like wobbly and looks like he's drunk. And also I want to minimize the chance that if someone bumps a table or a shelf or whatever, my miniature is going to go falling down and damage the paint, because repairing paint is not the most fun thing ever. But now let me get a softer, I think I already prepped this guy. Oh, wait, I have some older, so this guy is the Learn to Paint kit was one of the first things that they transferred, that they started putting out in the Bones USA. So these are early ones, and they were the softer material. But before that, they were in like Bones Classic, I think. I don't even think they were ever in Bones Black. I think they were just in Bones Classic. And I have a few of those left in various projects. I painted this guy a lot. I use him a lot in classes. I use him a lot for demos. He is the if you want to practice your blending guy. These are kind of the best in the sense of the most challenging, the most challenging kinds of folds, because they're just, they're perfect round shapes. So you really have to, if you're wanting to practice being smooth, but to do that, you don't want to have this, are you a Bones USA? I don't know if he's Bones USA. Let's get the pirate. I know he's for sure not. Because he's definitely on a wobblier plastic. And there's one of those little bumps that you can get from where the channels are. So even if I wasn't going to take off the whole mold line, I probably want to get off that bump, unless I'm going to paint the whole guy like he's got some kind of tropical disease. So that same motion that I was using here, and here I would, because it's not a flat surface, I'm going to try to move my limbs and whatnot out of the way. But it's like if you're peeling a carrot. So the scraping that you're doing on the hard plastic does not work on these. Either nothing happens or you just make weird shapes. You kind of gotta go at it like you're peeling a carrot. Just but in this case, instead of trying to peel off like a whole section, you're just trying to peel off the actual line. So it works with an X-Acto, but an X-Acto turns out, or X-Acto style blade, that the standard size 11 craft blade. It works. It's not my favorite. I find that it only takes 2 or 3 like person-sized Bones miniatures before this isn't sharp enough to do that. And then if it's not sharp, it is more likely to slip and injure me. So this is a scalpel. Weirdly enough, also a size 11. I don't know what it is about size 11. So here we go. Surgical blade, feather, and somewhere it should say that it's a size 11, I would think. Number 11, apparently. And I did like this feather brand. I bought a whole bunch of these. But keep in mind the point, like it's even sterile. Keep in mind the point of this object is to cut human flesh. So clearly it's very good at that, and we need to be careful. So I may even not talk and concentrate a little bit while I do this. But it's the same pairing thing, just with the, it's a smaller, more thin, it's a thinner, more delicate blade. So it's like it gets places a little easier and it stays sharp longer. Because yeah, that was just so much easier to get just under that mold line and lift it up. And this will require practice. Like, don't start on your favorite guys. Get a few of the ones you don't love as much. Because, learning how much pressure to use. Is a part of the experience. There's one all down this foot. Let's take the light down a little, maybe it's easier to see. I mean, the mold line is not terrible on this guy, but he's the one I had handy. Let's see if I have an ink grid that's an ink grid that looks like I got paint on. Ah, look around the base here. I think maybe you can see it. And here it's around the edge of the base. Let me move it around. We'll see if we can see that mold line just a little. So I would want to kind of go under it. And just lightly peel the mold line potato. But let's say you are a sensible person and you are thinking to yourself, I don't want to do the stupid thing that Rhonda is doing and shaving a scalpel towards her. Oh, hey, Valander, at the laundromat. Shaving a scalpel towards her tender flesh, which is like a totally reasonable decision to make. Another option is you can use these diamond files. So people are like, you can't use files on the soft thing. The trick is you have to be so soft. Like just like where, I was just going like this on the metal. I'm going, it's a decent amount of pressure. Sometimes I may even have to press more. Like this mold line on his tummy is a little more dramatic. So I can go in there and I'm pressing and I'm pressing. That is not how you do it on a soft plastic miniature. You are just lightly caressing the mold line away. I like to say that you should be able to do this to a baby, and neither the baby or the parents would be damaged by this. It also helps in this case to only go in one direction. So here I'm pulling to the right. And if I get a little, like, this is why people don't like using files and stuff on plastic miniatures, because you get these little, let me do it wrong. Let me do it wrong and see if we can get more of those. You'll get these little things that kind of stick up. All right, let's try on him. See if I can get more gribblies. Go nuts. So I've kind of made it worse, not better, right? So doing it in the one direction helps avoid that. But then if you do have like just a little one that's hanging on, you just go even more lightly in the opposite direction. But seriously, it's like I'm doing this to myself. Like it'd almost be ticklish. All right, yeah, gently massage the flash is not how I normally go to the baby comparison, but people find that bizarre for some reason. But it'll stick in your mind. Like that's how gently. So when I say you can use files on bones, which if you go on the Reaper forums at all, or they sent this out a few times with I think Bones 4, they sent out kind of a tips for dealing with bones. I did when they first started making the Bones miniature, so this is the Bones Classic shiny white deal. I got a bunch of them and I did experiments. I tried different paints, I tried different primers. I tried, painting over different primers, which is why I'm a no primer person, because that worked great. But that's verging on a religious topic that we do not debate on this channel. I just share my opinion that based on actual kind of sciencey research, it was the most successful in terms of simplicity and also durability of the paint. But anyway, this is how I discovered that you can use these as long as you use them real gently. I threw some in the dryer. But anyway, there's like 3 posts on the Reaper thing, and I think they're pinned. And it's like one is the first coat is the difference. One is Bones Facts. I can't remember the name of the other one. But anyway, there, and you can see my pictures. You can read my methodology, so you can decide whether you think that my science was sciencey enough. I'm going to do it on the actual miniature that I wanted to prep now. Because, yeah, here's a place I don't want to deal with this with a knife. So there's like a little bump along his staff because, you know, that's the mold line is going to make a continuous line. And I don't know how you would deal with that with a knife. So I'm going to use that crossing file magic that we talked about to go in between the wrap sections, and then just the flat file. I was not following my own advice there for a minute and going in multiple directions. Not flat, the rounder edge to get in the actual like cloth parts. And then if you find it hard to be that gentle with these, or you don't have these for some reason and you only paint plastic miniatures, so why would you need them? Although they work well on the hard plastic. These things are called sanding needles. And is this one worn out? Yeah, it might be worn out. So they come in different grits, different, like sandpaper. There's some are rougher than others. There are 3 total, I believe. Do I remember which is which? No, I do not. I don't get the gray, so I don't know if the gray is the coarsest or the finest. This white is clearly more coarse than the blue. I can feel it. So if you were to look for these, and they are often but not always on Amazon, you want sanding needles is the term. And I forget the name of the company that makes Alpha. I think Alpha is the company that makes them. So these are like really fine grit sandpaper, but in a shape that you can apply more, because you can buy really finely like you can buy sandpaper, or even like it's like kind of plastic with the sandpaper texture on it for hobby stuff. But it's then how do you get it, how do you get it into all these places with the pressure that you need? So these sanding needles are a way to do that. Ellender says, I tried both abrasive files and metal files on Bones and Bones Black. Abrasive files work better. On Bones USA, the metal files look better. I'm not sure what you mean. Is this kind of what you mean by abrasive files? So for metal files, this is a diamond file. So I specifically mean a diamond file. I don't even like these for metal with the crossing texture. We talked about those a little more in the beginning, probably before we got here. So it is a diamond file and one with a fairly fine texture is what you can successfully do that with. Or these things, if you can't find that with these sanding sticks, are good too. I'm going to start with the rougher one, actually. Let's see. I'll try it on this like weird little bumpy bit as well as a starting point. And it's still a pretty light hand. And it's still the idea of, go in one direction and then go in the other direction to get, and don't use this thing. So this is a mold produced plastic item. So it has its own mold lines and flaws. Like I said, you start seeing them everywhere after a while. Am I too close or not close enough to the camera? I can't figure out what it wants. So there's like a mold line down there, and then sometimes there will be these bumps on them. Like this one has a big bump, and I don't want to use that part on the miniature. I mean, I'm not sure there's much sand on that part, but it's not going to do me any good and could possibly do me harm. So I don't want to use that part on the figure. And sometimes the surface will still kind of look like not amazing. But I have found that as soon as I put paint on, I'm not seeing that. So as long as you're like a little bit careful and there's not like really obvious things poking up, people get way more traumatized about the soft plastic prep that needs to happen. So some of these places I probably would rather use the scalpel, but we'll just demonstrate So there's some hairs on there, some gribbly hangers. So let's go to the finer one. Maybe that one's too rough. And I'll just go the other direction. And eventually it should come off. Yeah, I think that white was too rough for this figure. This guy's probably Bones Black, not well. Oh, that's pretty wiggly. He might be a Bones original. And I had him, so he's one of the figures from Bones 5, and he was in the Learn to Paint kit that was only in Bones 5. And I really liked how the paint job came out, and I think what I liked about it is there was one very saturated color and the other color, so it was yellow, gray, and then like a dark brown with just a little hint of red. And I think that might be a kind of a good color scheme approach for people who are hesitant about color, or if you have to paint a bunch of guys, certainly. So you have that one intense color, and then your other colors are more neutral, and it makes it a little easier to deal with. And I thought it might be fun to do an episode where I paint him up with that same color scheme, but maybe using my standard techniques. Or not. I mean, maybe I should do him the way he is in the paint kit and then fix him up a little. I don't know. If you have an opinion, let me know. Valander, I call the ones with the file service made by cuts in the metal of the file metal files. Yeah, I think I call it hash marks or hashes. I don't even like these for metal, honestly. What I was saying earlier, the only reason I keep them around is to do the bottoms and bases quicker. So even for a metal miniature, I would prefer to have the diamond style file where it's like a rough surface. I mean, these might, let's find out. I've never actually tried these on metal. I figured they'd wear out pretty quick, but let's give it a shot while we're here. That's what we do on the show, right? We experiment and we try things. So I don't think I got all, did I get all the ones? I mean, no, I did not. So let's give that a shot. Yeah, I think that I would be there a very long time with that. So here's where I want to go to my diamond files. And this is even, that super tough file. I did have to kind of break these in. And I think it even said, I think there was a paper that came with them that said something about it. You had to, they were so rough in the beginning that I kind of had to start with the bottoms of, because it was there were little bits of the diamond stuff sticking up. I had to start with the bottoms of bases and kind of be gentle with them when I started using them on regular figures. But it would be stuff it would be big areas like this that I could do, and then I'd come in with my smaller files to do other sections if necessary. And this was primarily for prepping mass quantities of miniatures for classes. Because it's I want to give you a nice miniature, but I can't spend an hour on every single person's miniature. So, and now that it's the plastic, I can't do the fiddly knife thing for all of them. So unless it's really dire, I admittedly do not prep the plastic miniatures anymore. But there we are. All right, so I'm going to go back to my scalpel to get this one in his robe. And you sometimes have to think about stuff. So this mold line is right here. There's kind of, I don't know if the reflective light is helping or not. And I kind of have to think about, do I want to go from this angle or do I want to go from this angle? In this case, it's not straight in the middle of the fold. It's very slightly into the depression. If I go this way, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to unintentionally gouge with the point of the knife. So I would want to go this way, because if I hold the knife like this, it's not touching any other parts of the miniature. And then I'm just paring the mold line carrot away. If I can't get it all, I might have to flip and take the risk. But if I can, I want to avoid putting my knife in a situation where it can damage the figure, or me, to be fair. But certainly where it can avoid damaging the figure. Where on the boots, I'm not sure if I'm making the opposite estimation that I can reach it more easily. Here, so when I was talking about spotting the mold lines and how that's tricky, particularly with the shiny metal, You'll sometimes find that you have to hold it one way to see it, but then you have to hold it another way to use the tool on it. And that is challenging fun. That is part of the challenging fun of caring about mold lines. Which again, if your style or preference for painting does not require you to care about mold lines, feel free not to. I am not out here to judge people's preferences towards mold lines unless you are entering the MSP Open or another contest that I judge, in which case it is a factor, but it's not necessarily a humongous factor. Now this little thing is interesting because there's a hole. So there's stuff sticking up and there's stuff that's sunken in. So right there is kind of a little hole. And so I got rid of the stuff that was poking up with the knife. But unless I'm just going to keep carving down, I can't get rid of the little hole with the knife. That's not odd. This is a base frame. Will I care? Very likely not. If it was on like his shoulder here or something, that's when I might get the brush on sealer and use like just the tip of the brush to drop it in. Like you just kind of go, you just touch it there, and like I think fluid dynamics even sort of attracts it to the, so you're not doing like a stroke, you're just kind of trying to touch it in there and get the fluid to want to drift into the depression, and then you have to let it dry and then do it again and then let it dry and do it again a few times depending on how deep the little issue is. Like if it's just pock marks on the side of metal, this guy doesn't have it, but if you'll get these guys with chunky cloaks and robes, when it'll be like, I don't know, like almost like acne scars or something, like it's little divots. They're not severe, like you can sand them off sometimes, but it depends on the shape. Like if it's going into, these depressions in cloth like this, that can be really hard to reach with any of these tools. So that's where the brush on sealer becomes very nice. Like if this guy was in metal, because Bobby Jackson miniatures are actually notorious for doing the little pockmark things because they're big chunks of metal. I would just give like a coat with that brush on sealer to like the entire cloak area. There's no filigree, there's no embroidery, there's no details. I'm not going to mess anything up. I'm just trying to make everything smoother. So one or two coats would be enough to fill in those imperfections and make it look like a smooth piece of cloth. Obviously, you have to be more careful if you're applying it to something where there is detail. Like if I would probably not choose to use that when I was, saying how there was a little mold line over the Santa hat here. I wouldn't put brush and sealer anywhere near this because there's all these little texture marks that the sculptors put in to indicate the fur. And I don't want to fill those in. I mean, unless for some reason I do want to fill them in. But if I want it to look the way it's sculpted, I don't want to fill those in. Here, so there's a little pock mark and there's this, but it's a snowman. Like, is your snowball perfectly spherical? Probably not. So, like, I'm not going to fill those ones in. But on cloth that is very smooth, I would fill it in. On this, I would just live with the fact that base rims can be imperfect. I mean, I guess if I was doing it for a contest, I might not. But if I was doing this for a contest, I would do what we talked about in that other show, and I'd put them on a bigger base and sculpt more of this stone texture. And the show that I did that on, I'm going to say, it's not that far. It's like from September or October, because I had done this with the ReaperCon Sophie, and someone asked how I did it. So I got another copy of the miniature and showed how I did it on the base, like all the tools that I used and the methods that I used. And I think I actually talked about tools that you can make. Like you can make basic sculpting tools if all you're trying to do is stuff like, these stones or something, with toothpicks. So you don't have to, if you're not sure if you're going to like sculpting with epoxy putties, you can start, like you have to buy the epoxy putty. There's no way around that part. But you can start off with toothpicks. You sand the wood down to the shape that you want, and then you can use super glue to harden it. And I think the putty sticks a little less to the super glue as well, but the super glue kind of just makes it last a little longer as a tool. So staves and other wooden handled things are always interesting because there's often lines inscribed in them to mimic wood texture, and then sometimes the mold line kind of blends in with that, and sometimes it does not. This one I think is light enough that it blends in, or we're going to pretend that it blends in. These shoulders are kind of an odd shape. I might want to go back to the files or the sanding sticks. I'll usually start with the knife. Like I'll go around and get all the places that I can get with the knife. But then sometimes I'd rather switch back. Like I'd rather follow the mold line and switch back and forth to the tools as I need it. Just so that I'm not losing track of things. But that is because my brain very easily loses track of things. Yeah, that whole staff, I think, is turning into something that I would rather do with files or sanding sticks. So if you go search on Amazon and these aren't there, just wait a week and search again, because they like come and go. Or they might, I think they're also on Micromark. Or am I remembering correctly that Micromark is the online store that sells a lot of hobby kind of tools for smaller, hobbies that work on smaller scale things like we do. I feel like it's Micromark, but I could be misremembering. I don't go nuts buying tools, so I have bought these or checked on these recently enough to know that they still exist. But this is why I'm not really giving you brands for these files, because they're kind of, produced by miscellaneous Chinese companies, and the brand names are going to change often enough that any information I have is no longer pertinent, I'm sure, other than the Rio Grande, I'm not sure how they say their name, jewelry store selling the sets. Even if their producers change, their understanding of what that set should be should mean that they've vetted it. This is one of those unfortunate places where mold lines are really frustrating. Like this is like a gem or something like that. There's very few things I could think of that I could paint that to look like for a paint plastic surgery kind of deal. I just, if I don't want it to look like it was produced by a mold, I'm gonna have to deal with that mold line. All right, I think I'm getting too close to the camera is what's making me mad. I don't know. It's focusing on my fingers though. All right, if I do this, well, see, now I'm even closer and it's fine. I don't know what's up with the focus. It seems like it's very variable. Perhaps it's because these are just plain colored things and it's harder to focus on than when there are the paint colors and there's more for the camera to see, as it were. Because right now it's probably thinking that my fingers are the story, not the little tiny gray thing in the middle. And it's wrong, but I think that's the logic that it's having. But even though I said this is like the important thing, I have to decide, like, what is this miniature for? How much time is it worth me doing this, or how much unhappiness will I experience if I don't do this, is another consideration. And I admittedly am somewhat distraught by my mold lines, but I am working on you know, letting that go when it's depending on the purpose of the miniature. It is unfortunate that these ones are a little, this one down this side is a little thick and easier to see than some of the others, but it's where there's all this textury stuff. I believe this figure is called just Young Mage. I think it's just called Young Mage. So is it, what is your deal, camera? I tried moving it down a little, and I think that maybe I didn't care for that. Let's start that. I don't think that's working that much. The thing I think I need to do to fix the focus is actually move the camera head up a little, which would be a bit dizzying for you all. So I'm going to try not to do that. And I don't feel like I have to be too nuts with this guy. I'm just gonna check if there are a few places, because you know, the shoulders are gonna be pretty prominent when we're looking, you know, at the figure in its intended viewing angle. Because that's the other way to save you some effort on all the mold lines, is if it's not a contest entry or something, just think about, okay, what will people see if they look at the figure like this, which these are the ways they're going to look at it. They're probably not going to go, look at that mold line between the glove and the arm. Oh my gosh, it's the worst. At least hopefully that is not what they're doing. As much as I am like the mold line maven, that seems a bit too far even to me. Let me just check on time, because there's a part after this that even if you don't do this part, this is the part that I think you should do. And I'm going to zoom way out for that. So I think he's pretty much done. Oh, there is a very annoying one right there. And then under his, you know, under his robe, but I just said you shouldn't pay attention to that. So, and this is such a cute little detail on the sculpt. This is a tiny little frog. Is that adorable or what? His familiar is right there. Heading out into the world with the young mage. I hope he's for sale. I don't know. I guess because they're switching a lot of these over to Bones USA, maybe he's not. So the nice thing about the bendy bones is I can just totally do that and get to that mold line that I can see but not easily reach otherwise. So that is the upside. There is an upside to everything. So I think the young mage is pretty ready to go. And then we had one of these snowmen was pretty ready to go. So that's a Bones Black, Bones USA, and then one of the ladies. That one's not standing up straight, so I hope it's not her. One of the ladies was mostly done. Not that lady, because she's got mold lines all underneath. So I have to... Is she not standing upright? It's interesting. This is one of the times when it's... The way the camera is hard for you to see, but when they're standing next to each other, it's like the angle of their bodies is not the same. So this one has been bent, and I have to bend the ankle. It is best whenever possible to do that kind of thing before painting. It probably won't damage paint. I've only had it happen once where I had to make an adjustment after and it cracked the paint. Luckily, it was just a base coat, and I was able to fix it. So I'm doing this to see if they're at roughly the same angle, because I feel like this lady looks like she's supposed to look, and that one looked like she was leaning way back. All right, so she was finished, and he was finished. We've got all these 3 materials. So whatever the material, I don't care. I would do this. This guy's actually, I'm pretty sure I finished him before. I just was double checking. So there's one of those little things I would call a gribbly. I'll get these out of the... There's a gribbly. So I will just go the other way. It actually looks like I didn't even bother to. So why I have him out is I have painted, there are 2 other of these troglodytes. I think they all come in the same pack, and they were out of stock for like a really long time. So I kept not wanting to show them on stream because I don't want to show you guys something that you might get excited about and then you can't have it. But I believe that last time I checked, or I think I even heard somebody else had been waiting for them and they were excited because they were back in stock. But I did one of them, and I meant to bring them over and I didn't. I did one of them with complementary colors, red and green. It's actually magenta and like foresty green, but you know, it's the basic idea. And then I did the second one with complementary orange and blue. So I want to do this one with purple and yellow and kind of have a... Then there'll be like some 3 examples of what you can get messing around with complementary colors without a lot of other colors on the miniatures. I mean, I painted their weapons and whatever with other colors, but I just did their bodies with this, the complementary color idea, because one will often make a good shadow for the other. And the yellow and purple is going to be the hardest one. I probably shouldn't have saved that one for last to do on stream with you guys, but I like to screw up where you can see it, so I guess that's fine. But you will see a very cool thing about yellow and purple when I do that. Well, now I begin to believe I didn't prep him, but I swear I looked at him earlier and I saw where it looked like I'd shaved some stuff off with the knife. Well, paired. I like to think of it as pairing. So scraping on hard stuff, but pairing on soft stuff is my advice at any rate. Well, that's a gnarly, unfortunate one that I probably should just live with. See, I told you I get kind of nutty about moldlines. It's a weakness of mine. Just many years of habit. Like with the metal miniature, because like it's expensive and you gotta prime it. And I don't know. I always felt like it was worth doing the investment of time. One of the reasons I like bones is because I can far more easily talk myself into just letting it go. So this is not from the mold process. This is from my old double-sided tape that I don't like as much because it does this. Although the new double-sided tape does that on Bones USA for some reason. So there we have at least one of everything. There's not a true resin, but the Bones USA is really very close to resin in my experience. And Reaper doesn't make a lot of resin miniatures. They're mostly, you know, special edition things for ReaperCon. So let's see if that is far enough back to get this into view. This is a Tupperware. I'm not 100% sure that it won't leak through the lid. It's a Rubbermaid, but you know, it's like a Tupperware container. And it is filled with isopropyl alcohol. It's 95%, I want to say. Whatever the kind of the highest level you can get at the drugstore is. So you'll get a good whiff of it when you take that lid off. And also, this is very drying on your skin. So while I will occasionally get some on me, I like to use some kind of tweezers to get the miniatures in and out. And you can put like a whole bunch of these in at a time. Like if I'm kind of mass. Again, for conventions, I absolutely do this so that you can paint on them more easily. Oh, I already got some mine. So one reason I do this is for these softer bones, which is this guy, I think. If you do this, you are much less likely to have that hydrophobic thing where the paint doesn't want to stick. I'm not gonna say it solves everything, but it helps a lot. So I always do it for classes because I want people to be able to paint on miniatures as quickly as possible in a class. It works better than soap and water. I hadn't tested this when I wrote those documents I talked about earlier. It hadn't occurred to me to test this. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of trying to shake off some of the stuff and then just putting them on a paper towel to dry. Largely because I don't, depending what surface I put this on, I don't want the alcohol stripping something. It wouldn't matter on my desk, but just in case. So then I just leave them to dry on there for a while, and it evaporates. That's how rubbing alcohol works. So it's often pretty quick. So it doesn't even take me that long before I'm ready to paint. If I'm worried about it or I'm doing like a whole bunch of them, I'll flip them over eventually to encourage evaporation on the other side. But this step, either you do this or you get like dish soap and water and a toothbrush and scrub the miniatures. And I believe you should do that with every surface. With real resin, it's actually extra important, and you want to maybe even do it twice, because so when I explain the molding, how they make the Easter bunnies and what, there's like two sides, and then they shoot the material in the middle. For some materials, you have to have a mold release agent, or the little thing won't pop out. The mold release agent that they coat the molds in for true resin miniatures is super greasy. And it will absolutely cause your paint not to stick or to rub off very easily. So you really want to make sure you clean a resin miniature. I know a lot of people, even like really good painters, who say you don't have to clean your miniatures before you're painting. I have been at the Reaper factory and watched people make these. So, okay, nobody touches this when they make it because it's molten metal and then it's really hot metal. But after that, a big bunch of these goes over to someone who works in QC, quality control. And they pick them up and look at them and decide whether the cast is good enough to sell or not. They may use gloves, they may not. Then they take they take that same bin, all the ones that passed approval. And at that point, then also, they get a bin of Bones miniatures, or I assume Bones USA go through QC, but I don't know. Whatever thing, once it's gone through that point, maybe it hasn't been touched yet, but it might already have been touched once. Then there's a bin of them. There's, they call it the wheel of paint. So it's like a circular machine, and it's got places where you stick, oh, here, I got the smaller ones. It's got places where you stick these in a circle around the whole machine. And then they just grab these guys and they put them in. Obviously, he would need a bigger one than that. That is a person working the machine with their little greasy fingers that just went to lunch. There are oils on our hands all of the time. I wash my hands before the show and before I paint miniatures to try to minimize it. But, once I've done that step with the alcohol, I am going to try to touch it a lot less. I'm trying to do all my prep and then do that step. The washing is also going to take any dust off from what I just did, particularly the metal miniatures. When you're sanding that, like I think you just saw me wipe some stuff off the desk. That was actual little powdery pieces of metal, because that's what'll happen as you do the metal more. So they got touched to get put in the blister, and then the back of the blister paper, which, I still have this one. So this has glue on it somewhere, I think, or this has glue. Somewhere there's glue. And they put these on top, and then, I don't know, something presses it and heats the glue, and that's how that sticks to that. But basically, I'm telling you that people have touched your miniatures even before you get them. And those people may or may not have just eaten a giant greasy meatball sandwich or something. And I assume the same for the Chinese workers that are putting together the Bones bags, too. They're just grabbing them by handfuls out of the bins or whatever, throwing them in the bags for shipping, and then off they go. And then you get the miniature and you take him out of the pack and you're looking at him and you think he's cool, and maybe he sits on your shelf for like a while before you decide to paint him, even if he was prepped. So if you prep him, then you're touching him a bunch, but even if you didn't prep him, he's got dust on him. So I'm very big advocate on the washing, because if you're only going to paint, like, you're speed painting a miniature for an hour, you saw these guys are ready to go. You saw how quickly that went. I just have that little tub. I got my tweezers. I use the same paper towel all the time until it gets too gunky. It's just, dip, pull, dip, pull. I've gotten rid of the dirt. I've gotten rid of the grease. I'm maximizing my chances of the paint adhering to whatever my material is, or the primer. In the case of this miniature, that is the other non-negotiable step. If you have a metal miniature, and actually I'm leaning to, because Bones USA is so much like actual resin miniatures, I'm leaning to believing that these guys should be primed. I've painted directly on the surface. I've had one miniature that I felt like there was more rub off than I would have expected on a Bones Black or a Bones Original. Bones Classic, what do I call it? Classic, I think. But absolutely, with metal miniatures, you will get rub off almost immediately. Like the paint will not adhere well to the surface. The surface is too smooth or something. The primer is designed to stick to the metal and then have paint adhere to it. So you need that little sandwich layer in between your paint and your surface for best adhesion. And I think that is probably true of the Bones USA, but if you weren't going to handle a Bones USA figure a lot, I think you can get away with not priming that as well. And I did plan to prime at the end, but since I ended up talking about how you would prep all 4 materials, I didn't do that. I still have a little more prep to do too, but I may pick a project for, actually, I think I know what I'm going to do next week. So we were kind of talking about, the whole new year, new stuff ideas, but to me, it's not always, what I want to do this year is not new. I want to get rid of old. Either get it out of my house and admit I'm not going to do it, or finish it. So I want to finish this guy. This is like the second miniature I ever started painting. This is not what it looked like the second time, because then I stripped him and started again. And then I got this far, and then I got distracted again. So many millions of years later, or 18 or 19 years later, I would like to finish this figure with you guys. And I have some other figures I'd like to finish. Maybe that will be with you guys. I'm going to try to start streaming on my own channel, because I know you like me to mix it up, so you probably don't just want to watch me finish like 80 miniatures or something. But this one, I think, this is from the very first Reaper Learn to Paint kit. I meant to go see if I could find the instructions, but I'll save that for the episode where I actually paint him. He is primed, though. I think that's even the remnants of spray primer on the bottom of him. Spray primer is great for metal miniatures. It's actually probably better than brush-on primer for metal miniatures, because I think the kinds of chemicals they put in it etch into the surface a little more. I mean, I've painted a lot of miniatures just with brush-on primer, and it's been fine. But I think if you're looking to play with your miniatures and you can prime where you live, the reason I don't prime very often is I live where it's very humid, and I have like 3 days out of the year where I can prime. If it's just one miniature, I might sneak into my garage and kind of live with the fact that we may inhale a few fumes. But if I'm doing like a class's worth, I wait for those perfect days and prime all my class miniatures then. But I would probably just brush on prime these guys and not worry about it. I think they just need a little bit of what you get from primer. And again, I don't prime these ones at all. But when you prime, regardless of the method, if you can let the miniature sit for a while for the primer to cure. So the primer may say, touch dry in 10 minutes or something. I'm pretty sure that's what my primer says. I like Duplicolor sandable as a spray primer, which for some reason the auto stores in my area aren't even carrying anymore. I think we found one. Like I had to do online searches through all these different stores. There's like an auto zone that's 5 seconds from here. And I used to just go in and they had like black, gray, and white, and I'd get the primers in the colors that I wanted, and everything was great. And last time I tried it, it didn't work. And I had to I do like the stores that will show you like online stock levels, like can you buy it locally. So eventually I got it, but I was like, why is this such a colossal pain in the butt? But anyway, digression. And I think it's a very tolerant primer is one reason I like it. It has a large temperature tolerance and a decent humidity tolerance. And I think it says touch dry within 10 or 20 minutes or something. You can paint on your primer right away, but the primer is going to cure tougher. It's going to become a harder, better, more protective surface the longer you leave it. That is not the longer you leave it, but as long as you leave it for a few days. Which is also true of paint. Acrylic paint is touch dry within minutes. It doesn't fully cure for 24 to 48 hours. So the more you can get that stuff over with before you're playing with your figures, the less likely you are to experience rub off. So I don't seal my figures. I do all this stuff. I make sure I wash them. I put them in the alcohol like that because I think it really gets off all the grease and the dust and stuff. Then, if I prime it, if I can, if it's for playing, I'm going to leave it. I mean, often I'm painting things in a rush for Ron on a deadline, so I'm not going to leave it, but if it's brush on primer, I figure it's going to cure along with the paint. And then I leave the paint to cure if I can. So somewhere on my site, and actually if you go to the main page, so it's birdwithbrush.com, and look through it, there will be a thing about how to give your paint figures a sturdy paint job or something like that. The actual title of the article is how to paint a miniature that will survive how to get your paint job to survive the apocalypse or something. And it goes through like 7 or 8 different things that you do to maximize how strong your paint job is. And sealer is, like, in my mind, the last concern. Like a lot of people get all wrapped up in sealer, but if you've got that mold release stuff on it, and metal miniatures have mold release too, it's talcum powder ish. I don't know if it's actual talcum powder, but it's like talcum powder. If you haven't gotten that off, if you added grease from your hands, if you haven't, you didn't let your primer cure, you didn't let your paint cure, all of those things are way more important than sealer. And in fact, the curing should happen before the sealer, and then you let the sealer cure too. So all of these chemicals and things, there's a big difference between touch dry and fully cured, which is true of some glues as well. Like super glue bonds within minutes, but it isn't fully cured for 24 hours. So when I'm working on a deadline, I often prefer to use 2-part 5-minute epoxy glue, which starts to fully set within 5 minutes, but is fully cured within an hour. So even though it takes longer in the putting together moments, the curing part is quicker, and I can pick that miniature up after an hour and know that it's as sturdy as it's going to be. But that glue is that's a topic for another day that I probably won't ever do because I have a glue curse, and all you can learn from me about glue is how to fail. But anyway, it was great being back with you. I hope that it wasn't too tedious for you. I don't know if that was super boring or not, but I think prep is important, and it's worth knowing about, and some of the people who are newer to the hobby might not have known it. And there were a whole bunch of tools that I don't use a lot that I didn't get to. So I might do another episode. I've got these things. I was charging it. There's like electronic options. And I didn't even get to those. So we'll do another getting the lines off your miniatures in more radical ways. So I just showed you the very traditional tools, but we'll talk about new exciting tools, I guess, on another episode. Not like next time. I'll mix it up a little more than that. I know you like when I mix it up. But if there is something you want to see, and you're not someone who's comfortable talking about it in the chat, feel free to send me a private message here, or contact me on the Reaper forums, or via my Facebook page or the blog. And as ever, I still have not developed the habit of going to look at the Reaper Discord, so I would not use that as a method to contact me and let me know what you would like to see. But perhaps one day I will figure out Discord and be there. But for now, I'm going to let Quindy find us a raid, because I'm sure that someone else on Twitch is doing super fun things that we would enjoy watching. And I will see you next week. Happy New Year, everybody.